Tenerife, the largest of Spain's Canary Islands, is known for its vibrant nightlife, beautiful beaches and picturesque landscapes. This island attracts over 5 million tourists annually, including many young people seeking adventure. 19-year-old Jay Slater, born in 2005, and his friends were no exception, looking forward to enjoying the island's attractions and the rave festival that was being held there. Sometime before, he and his friends had heard about the NRG Music Festival, which promised to be a massive party, involving pool and boat parties, outdoor raves and events in the nightclub. At this time, Jay himself was in the process of turning over a new leaf and had recently completed a sentencing over crimes he'd committed in 2021, which we'll get into later. While trying to better himself as a person, Jay gained an apprenticeship as a bricklayer and was said to be a hard worker, which impressed his employer. Jay was from and had spent most of his life in Oswaldtwistle, Lancashire, and was about to embark on his first holiday abroad with his friends. It seems that Jay may potentially have been in two minds about going on this holiday, but his mother, Debbie Duncan, said that she encouraged Jay to go on the trip with his two good friends, Lucy Law and Brad Hargreaves. Presumably, Debbie must have thought that this would be a great experience for Jay and a good opportunity, not realising that something could go as badly awry as it did. Jay, Lucy and Brad attended the music festival, which was located at a venue on the beach of Papagayo, where the initial events of this puzzling incident unfolded. The planned events that Jay and his friends were so looking forward to spanned from the Friday the 14th through to Sunday the 16th of June. This festival was supposed to be the highlight of their trip, but it would also lead to the beginning of a series of unusual events that would lead to Jay's disappearance. The trio had enjoyed their time at the music festival over the weekend, but early on the Monday morning, a short while before 6 AM, after partying hard with lots of drinking and potentially other substances too for 3 days straight, Jay decided to leave with two men who also lived in the UK that he'd only just met. One of whom was Ayub Qasim, who really seemed to hit it off with Jay, and the other has not been named. I get the impression that the prior 3 days had taken their toll on Jay, as he was seen stumbling around the final rave event at the nightclub. At approximately 8:35 PM, Jay posted a playful Snapchat of himself, Lucy and Brad all laughing and having a good time at the club. At around 1 AM, Lucy and Brad were tired and had enough of partying, and decided that was a good time to call it a night and headed back to the hotel. Jay was seen dancing around shirtless and wasn't quite ready to end things just yet on their final night. He stayed behind with Ayub, and instead of heading to his hotel, he planned on leaving with them later. Lucy and Brad were said to have protested against this decision, but for one reason or another, Jay had made up his mind for some reason and insisted on going with them. This decision marked the beginning of what was to come. Jay, Ayub and the other man partied on until the early hours of the morning, leaving at sometime around 6 AM. Ayub and the other man, using their hire car, drove Jay to the Airbnb they were staying at, which was fairly secluded roughly 20 miles to the north, far away from his hotel in Playa de las Americas, Los Cristianos. According to Ayub, the three of them arrived at the Airbnb at approximately 6:30 AM. This was a particularly bizarre decision to have made, since Jay's own hotel room was only 10 minutes away from the nightclub, while Ayub's was so much further away. It's not clear if they'd planned to have more drinks or perhaps other substances back at the Airbnb, but for whatever reason, Jay wanted to go with them. Upon arrival, Ayub personally explained that he'd offered Jay the sofa to sleep on and threw him a blanket and a towel just in case he wanted a shower. The three men all then went to sleep, but were awoken shortly thereafter. A woman rang the doorbell and asked Ayub to move his car as it was blocking her in some way. Ayub complied and moved the car before coming back into the Airbnb. Around this time, Jay for some reason had decided that he wanted to leave. Ayub said to him that he could chill for a while and that once they'd all slept for a while and had woken up properly, he'd drive him back to the hotel. Jay didn't go for this, stating that he was hungry and wanted to get back. Early on the Monday morning, at around 7:30 AM, Jay posted a Snapchat of himself having a cigarette outside the Airbnb. He'd asked the woman who knocked on the door for directions to get back to his hotel, which again was located fairly close to the festival. She told him that it would be a very long walk back and it would probably take around 11 hours to complete. Instead, she advised him to wait for the bus, which arrives every 2 hours. Strangely, it seems that for one reason or another, Jay did not see this as an option and instead began to hike into the rural Teno National Park, which is a very mountainous area that he was not at all familiar with, to try to get back to the hotel. We know this because another woman spotted him 15 minutes later walking towards the park. Interestingly, the woman stated that she'd pointed in the direction that Jay would have had to walk, but for some reason he ended up walking in a totally different direction, which led him into the park. This area is known for its incredibly rugged and harsh terrain, and because of this interaction, it became the primary focus of the search efforts. One of Jay's friends described the area as extremely mountainous and disorienting. He said that wherever you looked, it was just mountain after mountain, making it difficult to identify any landmarks. While walking down the remote roads, Jay made a video call to Brad where he told him that he was pretty far away from the hotel and was walking back. He told him that he had to trek a long way across some gravel roads and such, and Brad could hear the stones crunching underfoot. At the time, Brad didn't think much of this and didn't realise that this was a dangerous act to be taking. Jay seemed fine, confident and unworried about the long distance he had decided to walk back. Though then Jay mentioned the fact that the app on his phone was telling him it was going to be a 14-hour walk back, but he didn't know if it was accurate, and it also said it would be around 15 minutes by taxi. Brad told him that he should just get the taxi as 15 minutes is nothing. Apparently, Jay then ended the call and told him that someone else was ringing and promised to call Brad back. It's not clear if he did get a call from someone else, but we do know that Jay ended up in a very precarious situation because at 8:50 AM that morning, he called Lucy. This time, he was more panicked and explained that he was lost and had no idea where he was, and that his phone was telling him it was going to take 10 hours to walk back. He told her that he'd injured his leg on a cactus, was thirsty and didn't have any access to any water, and to top it all off only had 1% battery left on his phone. During the phone call, I do believe that by using some kind of app on his phone, he was able to ping his approximate location back to Lucy, which corroborated that he was in the national park. This is obviously a very dangerous situation and never a spot that you want to find yourself in. Shortly after the phone call was made, the battery had completely drained, marking it as the last known time that anyone ever heard from Jay. Soon after this call came to an end, Lucy and Brad reported what had happened to the Spanish police, and an immediate, massive search operation was launched. The search involved efforts on the ground by way of local authorities, professional search and rescue teams, volunteers, alongside an aerial search with drones and helicopters. However, despite having an approximate location as to where he should have been via the mobile phone tower ping, they just weren't able to find him. The search went on all day, and somehow, in such a short time span between the call with Lucy and being reported missing, he had just completely vanished without a trace. What possible reason could Jay have had to take on the challenge of this absolutely massive hike to the hotel instead of just waiting for 2 hours at the bus stop? Or just ordering a taxi for that matter? Upon reflection, this decision really doesn't seem to make any sense whatsoever, and logic just falls apart. He didn't want to wait 2 hours for the bus, but was happy to hike for 11 hours to get back with no supplies at all, through a very harsh area in a foreign country with absolutely no experience or familiarity with the place at all. It's not clear to me why a person might make such an irrational decision, and there have been many speculations about this. Could he have been anxious for one reason or another about staying out in the open waiting at a bus stop like this, and felt that he needed to keep moving? It would appear that I'm not the only one to think that decision isn't congruent with the situation he was in, as has been described. After an initial failed search by the Spanish authorities, they made the call to the UK police, who then went to Debbie's home at around 2 AM and explained the situation to her. As time passed and Debbie had more time to think about how unusual this whole situation was, she alluded to the idea that Jay might have been taken by another person. Or, I suppose, perhaps found himself in some trouble in the first place, which is why he travelled with the two men to the secluded Airbnb. There isn't much in the way of direct evidence though to suggest foul play, and that idea does remain in the realm of speculation. Ayub himself had answered some questions which relate to this line of thought. As said, some point to the idea that Jay may have been scared or something along those lines. Ayub said, "I don't know why he was scared, and he isn't here to answer that question. I don't want to say. People could be going through something in their own heads, who knows?" I've got videos on my phone where me and him are videoing Rocky, the other man I assume, in the car where Rocky's sleeping on the front. We're just laughing at him. He was calm, it was a vibe, and we were just joking around. All of these people saying he was scared. What do you mean scared? Ayub reiterated that it was Jay who asked to leave the festival with them. He said, "He looked at me and said, 'I don't have keys to my place. My friends have gone back, can I come with you?' I didn't invite anyone. I don't know why he was scared, that's in his own head." When asked about taking Jay back to the hotel, Ayub said, "Yeah, I offered him a lift back, but obviously when I wake up, because you've got to remember we came back at 6:30 AM and I only slept for an hour before I had to move my car. I'm not driving another half an hour and all of this after being awake for an hour." Or in other words, from Ayub's perspective, he thought that they were having a good time and didn't seem to know if Jay was scared or what he might have been scared of. After the drive to reach the Airbnb, and after having been awake for a long time, Ayub first wanted to get some sleep before hitting the road again. Jay, on the other hand, for some reason that we don't know or understand, wanted to leave and go back to his hotel. In addition to this, though totally unrelated to Ayub and Rocky, Debbie received some text messages and phone calls from strangers consisting of absolutely awful messages, such as, "Kiss goodbye to your boy, you're never going to see him again," and just horrible things of that nature. It seems that the British police didn't seem to think that there was much substance to these messages, other than people being cruel for some reason. Truly awful people do exist after all, and there are those that get a kick out of causing such pain. Most people are good-natured and well-meaning, and it can be difficult to fathom that people would do things like this, but they're out there and they do. It's just not something that most of us could ever really comprehend doing. In the meantime, while the search was ongoing, Lucy set up a GoFundMe page for Jay and his family in an attempt to help with the search costs. She'd made it clear to the UK press that she didn't believe that there was enough effort in place to find him. She basically stated that while there were dogs on the ground and drones up in the air, she didn't believe that there were enough helicopters out looking, and that she was worried because Jay had been out there for a while now in this hot area without any supplies. At 12:30 in the afternoon, the Spanish police then heard of a possible sighting of Jay to the south of the island. The report came in that a member of the public believed that they'd seen Jay with two rough-looking men. The police did investigate this, though it appears that they didn't believe there was much credibility to the sighting, though I'm sure that this report cannot have helped the way that Debbie was feeling about the potential of foul play. 5 days after Jay vanished, another report came in which another member of the public believed that they'd seen Jay at a church, again sitting next to two men. CCTV footage did confirm that a man of Jay's build and size was sitting with two men, though it could not be confirmed that it was actually Jay, as the footage was not of high enough quality to distinguish that. After the authorities, Jay's father and brother did head to the church too, but this turned up nothing. The following day, according to The Guardian, authorities went in to search a couple of rundown homesteads in the national park, close to where Jay's phone last pinged the tower. What was found in one of these buildings can only be described as strange. Inside, they found, and I quote, "In a sinister twist, eerie signs of life were found in one of the two ruined homesteads in the ravine. Shoelaces tied with twigs to form haunting symbols like something out of a horror movie, empty water bottles, and most strange of all, a clean set of women's clothes." I'm not really sure what to make of that. It's certainly odd, but there was nothing present to suggest that Jay had been inside. However, while all of this was going on, a 51-year-old Scottish man had also found himself in trouble and got lost in this area. In a random twist, this search for Jay actually found the missing hiker, who was incredibly tired and disoriented upon his discovery. Thankfully, he was okay and was taken for medical care. Almost 2 weeks into the search, a firefighter who had been a part of the effort the whole time told the press that he personally found it very strange that Jay had still not been found. He stated that it was a small island and the area that Jade disappeared from didn't have too many places that one could hide from an extensive search effort like this. After all, there was a significant amount of resources put into this search. Jade's father himself, when asked if he felt the Spanish police were doing enough, stated, "Yes, I do. Everyone's been up here looking for him." Because he hadn't been found yet, Lucy, among others, believed that there must have been a third party responsible for this. Jay was described as being incredibly street smart and knew his way around in that regard. And with the background that he'd had, it's hard to imagine otherwise. Lucy commented on that aspect and stated just how strange it was that he wouldn't have just waited at the bus stop in the first place, or one of the closed restaurants that he would have passed, which would have opened shortly after he walked by them. He could have charged his phone there, she suggested, but for some reason he just seemed desperate to get back to the hotel. If Jay was a bit freaked out or something, I wonder just what might have happened to put him in that state of mind. There's a lot of criticism to be had here with the local authorities too. The two men that Jay had last been with at the Airbnb, excluding the woman that briefly interacted with him, they were identified and questioned by the local authorities, but nothing came of that, and then they were allowed to fly back to the UK in the immediate aftermath of the disappearance. Their flight was booked for the 17th, though the police requested that they stay one more day, to which they complied. However, they were allowed to fly back to the UK on the 18th. Now, after questioning, the authorities must have felt that the two men had done nothing wrong and didn't have anything to do with anything. However, it seems to me that the last two people to have seen him might be important to the investigation should anything else arise. So it's not clear why they weren't at least asked to stick around until more information was known. After all, travelling with two men you'd never met to a secluded Airbnb in the early morning after a long night out and then vanishing so thoroughly is rather odd. Now, the timeline is a little hazy here, and I'm not sure if this next part happened before or after Ayub was questioned by the police. But 2 hours after Jade vanished, Lucy was determined to find some answers and track down the Airbnb. Lucy stated to the press that she'd managed to find the place as Jade provided his location before he went missing. She said, "They seemed startled and surprised that I'd found them. I asked where Jay was and they told me that he'd gone out for a cigarette, then came back and left to catch a bus into town. They were shocked I'd found them, and although the police have spoken to them, I soon found out that they'd left the country. They need to be questioned properly." This disappearance drew massive attention online, with over 500,000 people joining a Facebook group dedicated to what was going on. And I'd like to know if my American viewers and those from other parts of the world had heard about Jay. In this Facebook group, there has been a fair amount of criticism directed towards the authorities. As said, the search did have access to a lot of resources and specialised equipment, including thermal imaging cameras fitted to drones and helicopters. But their communication with the public was almost non-existent. For one reason or another that is not completely clear, they were not forthcoming with any information or evidence. The public, the press, and to some extent, the authorities in the UK were left in the dark about any progress. Though that may have just been because there wasn't any at that time. Members of the local community and volunteers were sharing some information though about the search effort. These searches highlighted the treacherous nature of the terrain and how the weather conditions worsened soon after the disappearance, which was hampering the search effort. It was explained that during the search, one moment it would be fine and they'd have drones up in the air, and then shortly thereafter, heavy rains would flow across the mountains and would force the aerial search to pause. The search dogs also just couldn't find Jay's scent trail anywhere. One local gave a description of the area that they were dealing with. He said, "The Teno National Park is a very beautiful part of the island, but with that, there does come a lot of risk. It's very mountainous and extremely barren. There's a lot of ravines, a lot of crevices and uneven ground. A lot of it has very thin air. After searching for a few hours, I was knackered. It's very hot, but there are fairly sudden temperature swings. The area has its own microclimate. One minute it can be sunny and the next it can be raining quite heavily and then high winds. During the day, it can reach 28 degrees Celsius or 82 Fahrenheit, and during the night it can reach 12 Celsius or 50 Fahrenheit. Around 5 days or so into the search, and the Spanish authorities began looking into Jay's background, as they stated that it was odd that there had been no insight gained by way of the searches, nor further sightings or CCTV evidence of Jay anywhere. Certain details came out pertaining to Jay, and it was found that in 2023, Jay had been handed an 18-month community order at Preston Crown Court for aggressive acts, including the intimidation of witnesses and supply of Class A substances alongside street robbery. So, it does appear that Jay himself had been involved in particularly shady things back home in the UK. Specifically, it appears that Jay was present in an attack on a 17-year-old male where a golf club and a blade had been involved. It does seem that Jay himself had something of a checkered past, which led a lot of people to speculate that he may have gotten himself in trouble in regards to substances while abroad. Jay's first encounter with gangs happened during his earlier years. Apparently, in November of 2017, when he was just 12 years old, Jay was with a friend in his hometown. While he and his friend were together, 3 men hopped out of a car and attacked them. Jay suffered a head injury and managed to hide under a car until a passerby intervened and the gang members fled. Sadly, at that time, it seems that Jay did not get the memo that getting involved in this kind of culture was not a good idea. 4 years later, when he was 16 years old, he became a part of a loosely organised street gang consisting mostly of 14 to 17-year-olds. Jay would go on to commit the acts against others that he endured when he was 12. Only, as evidence seems to suggest, perhaps worse with golf clubs and the like. The 17-year-old mentioned that Jay was involved in attacking was called Tom Hilton. In 2021, Tom was in a town called Rishton, where he was at the mill, which is a place where young people hang out. While there, he was confronted by a gang of 8 youths, one of which was Jay. Tom was surrounded and stood no chance. At first, it was only fists, but then for some reason, the 8 decided to escalate it and Tom had lacerations to his shoulders and legs, though the main injury was to his head. After Tom fell, the group of 8 fled and just left him to fight for his life on the ground. During the court case heard against the gang, Tom recalled in his testimony saying that the gang acted like a pack of gorillas. He stated that they laughed and joked throughout the attack while taunting him. Philip Parry was the judge and he stated to the gang, "You should all be thoroughly ashamed of yourselves, but I am not at all convinced that you are. Many of you have found these proceedings amusing throughout the trial yesterday and today, showing disrespect to the court. I hope, for the sake of all your families, the public, and the people who have offered you jobs and apprenticeships and the sort, that you will all grow up." Instead of sentencing Jay and the others to a serious charge which would have landed them all in youth custody, he instead leaned towards a lesser punishment that looked towards rehabilitation given how young the group were. Most of the boys ended up with the community service and time spent engaging in rehabilitation services, alongside 150 hours of unpaid labour, which seems to be extremely light considering just what had happened and is really unbelievable actually. It's not clear if this specific act with Tom had anything to do with banned substances, but we do know that the group of 8 were involved in them. Because of Jay's past, the idea that a lot of people seem to believe was that Jay may have been a mule, and was supposed to meet an associate in Tenerife, but somewhere along the way, things went awry. This supposed associate anonymously stated that Jay had been given a backpack filled with pills that were estimated to be worth just shy of £200,000, or $257,000. According to Kevin O'Sullivan from Talk TV, they tried to question Lucy about this particular aspect, and allegedly, according to them, she was deflective about it, saying something along the lines of that she's too tired to talk about it. This supposed associate went on to state that hours before Jay went off with Ayub and Rocky, at 3 AM, Lucy received a phone call from Jay. In this phone call, Jay allegedly told Lucy that he'd lost the bag and was crying, which if true might suggest that he was involved with some nefarious types who might have been fairly angry at him. It is important to just note here that there is no direct evidence of this, only this supposed rumour. To be fair also, it's important to bear in mind that the groups of islands around Tenerife, and Tenerife itself, do have a reputation for gang culture. So while obviously that doesn't confirm whether or not Jay had gotten himself involved in this kind of culture there, it does seem to exist. For instance, Tenerife is a very popular tourist hotspot for Brits, and recently there was a warning issued. Brits are now being warned of a dark underbelly that haunts the popular destination. Those heading to the island's party hotspot of Playa de las Americas have been warned that it has a serious substance underworld that preys on young holidaymakers, which can easily see innocent Brits landing themselves in hot water. So it does seem that the place is awash with this kind of stuff, and with Jay's history, you could see why there are those that might lean in this direction and think that some kind of deal went incredibly wrong. Also, it was realised that Ayub had been sent to prison 9 years ago in 2015 for being a part of a sophisticated operation to flood certain Class A substances across the Welsh border. Ayub, apparently, was found to be the ringleader of a gang dealing these substances in London and by all accounts was a rather big player in this scene. Additionally, it has been pointed out that when looking at CCTV images of Jay on the dance floor, he was in fact wearing a black rucksack, which people have speculated may have contained the aforementioned pills or substances. While there is no definitive evidence of this, it seems that the reasoning people have been using here is that it's incredibly hot there, rucksacks aren't exactly comfortable, so what was so important that was in there? I would also point out the press have also speculated on that very aspect too, while demanding that others stop speculating. Further news on this front also came to light, and it was alleged that Jay had, right before he vanished, stolen a £12,000 Rolex watch. Apparently, Jay had sent a Snapchat to his friends boasting about stealing it. Weirdly, Jay's friends seemed to be adamant that he likely did in fact do it, as he wouldn't make up such a claim. These Snapchats, I believe, were sent while he was in the back of the car with Ayub and Rocky, though Ayub stated that he was unaware of a Rolex being present and didn't think that Jay had one. Back at the nightclub when the watch was stolen, whether by Jay or not, though I believe he may have been accused at the venue, which he denied, the incident was said to have caused quite a scene. No matter how you look at these factors, it's all very odd, and to some, suspiciously so. Anyway, approximately 2 weeks after Jay was reported missing, authorities announced that they would no longer have search teams on the ground, but the case remained open and any new tips or lines of inquiry would still be pursued. Active search efforts were suspended unless new information came to light. Lucy tried to address information online that she believed to be wrong. Specifically, she weighed in on an incident where a false lead suggested that Jay had taken a taxi back to Los Cristianos. Lucy dismissed this possibility, stating if this was the case, he would have rung his mum or one of us. I know him well and he would not have us worrying. Someone is trying to deter the police from being up there. I'm starting to think he's been taken. As earlier mentioned, this incident garnered massive attention on social media, but it also attracted some rather nasty actors. These bad actors targeted Jay's family with malicious intent. Debbie had been particularly affected by these actions. She received numerous prank calls and inflammatory messages, which intensified as the groups grew in popularity. Debbie reported receiving calls from individuals with northern British accents using unknown numbers, claiming they had taken Jay due to an alleged debt he owed. TikTok users rapidly became captivated with Jay's disappearance, sharing updates to increase awareness. However, the tide quickly turned against him when details emerged about Jay's involvement in the golf club and blade attack. Initially, users were calling for assistance in finding him, but soon their messages shifted to something more grim and hoping for his demise, which is quite dark. As well as Jay's employer speaking out publicly in Jay's defence, Tom Hilton, the earlier victim of crime, needs to be given a lot of credit also, because as these details were emerging, public sentiment changed very negatively towards Jay and his family, with a lot of hatred being spewed on social media, but Tom stated, "Whoever's writing these TikToks, give it a rest. This young lad is missing, and his family is heartbroken. Put yourself in their shoes. Stop talking nonsense on social media and get this lad found. Stop mentioning my name and all of this and that. Have some respect and help find this boy and get him back to his family." That was a very commendable thing to do given what happened to him, and speaks very highly of Tom's character. Debbie, although deeply worried, fluctuated between what she felt may have happened. There are hints that she felt that Jay may have been taken. However, she also thought that it was plausible that Jay was simply disoriented and didn't fully take in what would actually be an 11-hour walk back to the hotel to the south of the island. Despite Jay telling his friends on the phone that he knew it'd be a long walk, Debbie pointed out that he had likely drank an awful lot at the festival. Combined with his unfamiliarity with the island, she suspected he had simply gotten lost. Jay's family and the public at large were left grappling with numerous unanswered questions. Why didn't the police consider the two British men as suspects? Was Jay involved in certain banned substances again, despite appearing to have reformed? Did the theft of the Rolex play any role in his disappearance? Why would Jay choose to walk for 11 hours without supplies, a phone battery, or directions instead of just waiting for the bus? Why didn't he return to the Airbnb and ask for a ride? How did he vanish completely in less than 30 minutes? And why did the Spanish police refuse assistance from the UK police? These questions remained open, leaving everyone searching for answers. Some of the speculations and ideas being thrown around were that Jay may have been met with foul play right from the start and was taken. Again, people talked about the Rolex or the potential substances that he may have been carrying. One journalist from the UK had a conversation with a former military officer who stated that we're obviously not being kept up to speed, and that he found it very surprising that the final ping to the phone tower was from an area that was very steep to get to and was covered in undergrowth and cacti. Which actually is very odd, because firstly, it implies that Jay completely left the beaten path and was no longer travelling along the remote gravel roads. Secondly, when people go missing, what you tend to find is that they travel downhill, especially as they become weaker and more thirsty. Missing people don't tend to traverse steep areas like this if they have no plan, and Jay was certainly not a survivalist. This led to some speculations that he may have tried to hide and wanted to take a route back to the hotel that was completely out of sight, but was then found by whoever it was that had bad intentions for him. To me, this is incredibly unlikely, as first of all, he was 20 miles to the north of the nightclub. And secondly, the odds of walking into this national park and just finding Jay is so small that it's beyond credulity, and it's very difficult to believe that the events unfolded in that manner. After all, given Jay's interaction with the woman who gave him directions, we know he entered the park alone. This brings us to the 15th of July, 29 days after Jay disappeared. A body was found in a ravine not far from the phone mast that Jay's phone had pinged off on the last day that he was aired from. I didn't actually realise that the military had been involved in this search, but the body was found by the Guardia Civil, which is a national gendarmerie force and is military in nature. Essentially, the force is responsible for civil policing under the authority of both the Ministry of the Interior and the Ministry of Defence. Previously unknown to the general public, the police search for Jay continued discreetly after the police officially halted the search efforts 2 weeks into the investigation. The Spanish police intended to lessen the public focus on the case by announcing the end of the search. Despite the public statement, the search persisted, away from the visible paths and trails around Masca. Specifically, in an area known as Juan Lopez, mountaineers descended into remote, inaccessible locations, cutting through dense vegetation. For weeks, those following the case of Jay Slater speculated over what could have happened to the teen who vanished during a mate's holiday in Tenerife. Now, a preliminary autopsy has provided some harrowing results. Jay's remains were finally discovered in the Rocky National Park, mere meters from his last known location, following a desperate month-long search. However, officials warned that identifying a cause of passing might take time given the very deteriorated state of the body, which was recovered from an almost inaccessible ravine. A preliminary autopsy points to the cause of passing being on account of a fall or plunge from height, with Civil Guard spokesman confirming that Jay's injuries included several broken bones. They shared, "The body of a man located yesterday has been identified as that of Jay Slater through fingerprint comparison and identification." This was then verified by the Spanish police and the Canary Islands Higher Court of Justice. Some of Jay's clothing may have been removed, as reports state that some of his clothing and belongings were found near to the body, as opposed to on it. Though I'd imagine the area was very hot, so while the report isn't specific, it's not unlikely that he might have removed his shirt or something like that. A specialist team was deployed by Jay's devastated family have returned to the location known as Juan Lopez Ravine, where his body remains were found. Preliminary post-mortem reports confirmed that the injuries were consistent with a fall from height, but there were still other unanswered questions. The team leader revealed that their dog has indicated a very difficult and dangerous area in the ravine, from where it would have been impossible for Jay to make it to the sea. Presumably, while vague, that means the thinking was likely that Jay may have seen the coast from whatever vantage point he had, tried to make it to the sea but had fallen before he was able to do so. There has been a lot of speculation in how people are finding it odd that Jay seems to have been found in an area previously searched. meaning that he may have been missed or not present during the time the area was gone over. Former detective William Thomas stated, "The area where the body was found is around a 20-minute walk from the pin drop location. The terrain is rough and hazardous, and having now seen the video of the search team on Monday morning, and that the helicopters was in the same area on Sunday afternoon where the body was recovered, it is clear to see how treacherous and dangerous it is. A slip or loss of footing would prove fatal." Williams Thomas said that the body was found 20 minutes away, while other reports stated that the body was found a few meters from the last known location. So there is a discrepancy there, but either way, Jay's body was discovered close to his last known location. The BBC did question this also, stating that specialist search dog teams from Madrid and helicopter crews alongside drones did scour the rough terrain. Days of searching this area had found nothing. Did they unwittingly walk past him the first time round? The Guardia Civil have declined to answer any questions about this. They told us journalists that we don't give details of the investigation. That's a little odd, though the Guardia Civil may feel that admitting to missing the body, potentially on numerous occasions, might make it seem as though they weren't as thorough with the search as they should have been, casting a negative light on them or their ability. Some have taken it as though it could mean that the body was placed there after the fact. However, that seems highly unlikely for a number of reasons. First of all, the state of decay of the body is congruent with it being there for a while. Now, in hot weather, the deterioration happens rather quickly, but they seem to be adamant that the body had been in a state of decay for a while, meaning that if the body was not in that location originally, someone would have had to have taken it there. This is a very remote area without any vehicle access, so the idea that someone had managed to carry it all the way to this location through harsh mountainous terrain is incredibly unlikely. That would require an enormous amount of strength to pull off that most do not possess in a very high risk area in terms of people and authorities actively searching. It seems highly unlikely that was the case. Well, with that, that's pretty much all of the information that I'm aware of, so it's probably a good time to hand it over to you in the comments below. I'd just like to take the time to thank you for watching, and a big thank you to the patrons who've been running around on the screen. If you have any plans to go to a remote or wilderness area, please do remember to let people know where you're going and to plan ahead. If you found this video informative, please do remember to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. It helps me a lot. And do drop me a comment as I read pretty much all of them. If you didn't like it, then feel free to give me a thumbs down. I'm just looking for your honest opinion either way. I hope that you've had a great day or evening depending on where you are, and I'll see you in the next one. And remember, be safe guys. Peace.